again, if you're straight with people,
Yeah.
if you face the difficult stuff and you stand alongside people, you kind of walk with them and do the very best you can for them without in any way trying to pretend that it isn't at times horrible. You'll give yourself the chance to see people at their best.
On today's episode, I'm joined by Guy Trevithick, General Manager of Twinings Tea. I'm really excited for you to get to meet him, get to hear about some of his wisdom that he's acquired over a long career. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe on our YouTube channel. It really helps us grow and develop and get more guests on as well. So please do take a moment to do that. We are also on all the major social media platforms. You can find links via our website, which is www.goencourage.com. Hey, so here I am with Guy Trevithick. I've said that right?
Yep, that'll do. Heard a lot worse. So, yep.
Heard a lot worse. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Good to have you. Good to have you. We usually start off by asking people what their name means. And I was thinking about this and I was like, Guy, is it self-explanatory or is there some meaning behind that?
Well, I think my folks gave me the name just because it was one syllable. It was short because the second name's a bit longer. I think it was probably as simple as that. But the name Guy, I think, comes from the French guido, which means guide or leader. But there's also this kind of English element to it, which, if you remember the history and the gunpowder plot back in 16 something or other, when Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament, and he got foiled, and then this tradition grew up of every year on November the 5th building bonfires and burning effigies of Guy Fawkes, and from that came the use of the word guys, and a guy as a sort of a person or as a group of people, group of men, and ultimately it morphed into sort of be just a description for a bunch of people. But originally, after the Guy Fawkes thing, actually Guy and guys were known as the kind of lowest of the low, the most disreputable people after the sort of Guy Fawkes legacy. So, guide or leader or disreputable person, I don't know. Pays your money, you take your choice.
I'm going to take the guide at the leader side. I like that part. But I suppose, Guy Fawkes was a leader as well in some sense.
Well, it just shows that you could the direction you take is what matters.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. And Trevithick, that's an interesting name. Does that come from somewhere?
Yeah, West Country.
West Country.
Get down to Cornwall. There's loads of us. Trevithick, Trescothicks, if you're a cricket fan. Yeah, so actually, it's originally from Cornwall, and in fact, part of my family still live down there in a place called little hamlet called Trevithick East Farm. Nice. So you can still find the home of the Trevithicks down there. Get down to Cornwall. I went for the first time last year. First time. I've been here.
Where have you been, Rix?
I lived here my whole life.
Just never made it down to Cornwall. Yeah. I think it's really easy just to get on a flight and go somewhere. But when we went down, we were blown away. It's gorgeous.
It's
absolutely
beautiful.
Stunning.
No, it is beautiful.
Yeah, so thank you for building Cornwall. So talking about family, have you got a big family, small family?
Yeah, not so big really. There was my brother Neil and I when growing up, two of us. My dad for most of his working life was in the Navy, and so we moved around quite a bit. In fact, I think it felt like every naval port on the south coast we lived in. I was born in Plymouth. My brother was a couple of years older than me. He was born in Weymouth. My father was posted abroad for a period, so he served on a NATO base, I think, in just outside Oslo in Norway. So we moved there for a bit, and then back to Portsmouth, further up the coast. A lot of naval bases and life by the water. But yeah, there was two of us, and then my wife Jane, she didn't exactly bring a huge family. She's an only child,
Right.
And her dad passed away when she was just a child. So there was her and her mum. So we're not the biggest family unit, but that was our life.
You fit around the Christmas table, right?
Yeah, we do. We do.
Amazing.
There's space for us all. That's for sure.
So remembering back then, was there like a particular profession that you aspired to go into when you were older, or even if it was just, hey, I want to be an astronaut, those thoughts that you have when you're young? Was there anything that you had in mind then?
Yeah, I think I was pretty lazy in that respect, and any superhero that was going from the Beano's Desperate Dan to whatever.
I remember those comics. Yeah, I remember those comics. Yeah.
So, I wish I could tell you a story about, I had this kind of revelation when I was about 7 years old that I wanted to be X or Y. That's not my story. I was just mucking about when I was kind of just a kid having fun. But I think though that there was a particular friendship that when I got into those teenage years, and when you're starting to work out what you think about a little bit about yourself and what matters to you, and you're kind of finding your way and trying a few things, exploring a few ideas. I had some really good friends, and as I said, there's a number of them that are still friends today, all these years later. But there was a particular mate of mine called Chris. Shout out to Chris. Still good friends today, although he now lives in Australia, so it's pretty inconvenient, actually, Chris. But we still stay in touch, although Melbourne's a long way from Staines. But actually,
probably the furthest place you could go.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe that's why the friendship works. He said, "Listen, it's only going to work if I go a long way away, guy." But I think my dad was kind of quite a laid back guy. He's quite easygoing guy, and he had a way of getting on with people, I think. But when I came across Chris and his family, it was like I met this kind of tour de force, this kind of whirlwind type that I hadn't really come across before. And the thing about, his family, because we were going to school was a little way away from where my family lived. I used to get and spend weekends and holidays with him and whatever, and his family were incredibly welcoming and generous, and accepted anyone and everyone. But in amongst this, Chris just gave himself 200% to everything he did. It didn't matter what we were doing. He was maybe a bit over competitive.
Right.
He was super competitive, but he just whatever we were doing, whether we were just mucking about, throwing a tennis ball around, having mock fights, running around, or whether it was sport or whatever, he would just go for it. And if he failed or fell over or it didn't work, he'd just get up and he'd just keep going, give himself 200%. He'd leave nothing.
Wow, that's cool.
And I think what that opened up for me actually was, wow, God, I wonder what would happen if you. Whatever you're doing, you guys just give it everything. If you just hold nothing back, and if you fall flat on your face, if you fail, if you mess up, just keep going and keep giving it your all. Wow, what would that look like for you?
Yeah,
And I think actually going back to your sort of question, I think that of all the things I took out of my, call it childhood years. Actually, as I emerged into adulthood, it was this kind of go for it, Guy. Whatever it is you end up doing, I had no idea what I wanted. Just give it.
Yeah.
And that I sort of, in a sense, I saw being lived out by Chris and his family, and I was kind of fascinated by it.
And would you say, looking back now, hindsight's a special thing like that? Do you think that happened? Do you think you were conscious about that? Did you think, oh yeah, I want to be like that? Or was it just something that you kind of fell into,
I think it was, I don't think there was an aha moment. I think it was just because I saw Chris doing this, and all those kind of, it's only a game, does it really matter? It's just crazy questions for Chris. He was just... But so I think it was something over time. And then when I sort of thought, well, what does this look like for me? You know, Chris is Chris, that's cool. And as I sort of pushed myself a bit, and it started with some really simple things. What would happen if then I realized, wow, actually, I didn't think I could get this far or do this thing. I might not have been the best at it, but wow, Chris started a business when he was 18. I mean, it just never occurred to me. We're going to start a business. What do you mean? How? Where did that come from? But he did. Kept it going for about 5 years, and we ended up both going to the same uni. And
so he's running the business while he's at uni.
Yeah. And it was a kind of entertainment thing, you know, and all the rest of it. But it worked, and actually, I was an employee. He was okay as a boss, actually, paid good wages and all the rest. No, we had a lot of fun together. But I mean, you know, it would never have occurred to me to have started a business. I mean, look at all the things that could have gone wrong. It might not work. You know, people might become a laughing stock. He did it.
You just went for it.
Wow.
It's almost like there's a Rocky theme, you know, playing in the background as he's doing all of this. You know. Wow.
But yeah, so yeah, as I say, then I gradually just sort of, I think it just sort of almost like grafted into the way I was approaching a few things, and so thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Shout out, Chris. If you're watching or listening. So if you fast forward from there to now, having that mindset, where has that taken you? Where have you got to with, you know, putting in 200% and just going for it?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting thing. I mean, you'll probably hear me talk a little bit about some of the what I see as the tensions between different, whether it's different values or different circumstances in life. The sort of tension that I think often we need to hold. That life is very rarely. Let me say, it's very rarely binary. You know, I know that's a bit of a thing at the moment in the culture today. You know, are you from the left or the right? Are you in or you're out? Are you with this group or with that? Well, I very rarely think it's as simple, or that's a very healthy way to look at life.
Agreed.
And I guess one of the things that sort of emerged over time for me was this, you know, sort of going for it, for want of a better phrase, give everything 110%, and that kind of provokes action. And
I think you've lost 90% somewhere there. 110%. What happened to the 200? No, I'm joking.
You become a bit more realistic as the years go. But at the same time, there's a weird thing that actually, well, here's a statement. I'm not quite sure whether this is true or not, but let's go with it. That there's no causal link between effort and achievement of things of significance. Now, it just so happens that, you know, most of the people that I think about who have achieved, you know, things of significance in whatever walk of life, they do tend to have worked really hard. But I don't think there's a causal link. So I kind of also started to explore and think about, well, actually, a brilliant idea is a brilliant idea. I mean, how long does it take to come up with a brilliant idea? I found it actually was far easier to come up with really bad ideas, you know, and maybe you need 10 of those to come up with a brilliant idea. So, but I think holding this tension this is one of the areas where it took me. That actually, yes, there's a place for action, but giving 110% or 200%, however much, is not just all about effort, because whilst hard work might kind of come at times, it's not everything. And often we can, I've certainly done it, but we can move to action, I think, far too soon on something, whatever it might be, and actually holding back and reflecting more, and those are other themes, will really serve us well. So I think where it took me was, when the time is right, go, give it everything.
Yeah.
But actually, you need something to hold that intention, because just action on its own doesn't always have a happy outcome.
No.
So
And it's really interesting because I guess it's what your starting point in, where your starting point is as well. So if you're someone who takes no action and spends 20 years, thinking about doing something, then it's about, I like the way you put it, the tension, about getting to that place where there's a balance between the two. You're not all action and binary in that sense, and then no action. You kind of have to find a space where, there's some courage involved in knowing what that space feels like when you're there, because a lot of the times we don't, do we? But then, going for it, like you said,
Well, yeah, I mean, saying no is just as valid as saying yes. There are many stories of people that they really thought it was a good idea to go full on for whatever it was. It just turned out that actually there was wisdom out there from other people or other learning, that if only they'd made themselves kind of available to it, they would have realized that they might have had a germ of a good idea, but setting off, from the charge of the Light Brigade, down. There are lots of examples of people that demonstrated great courage in the sense they decided they went ahead with something where the outcome was far from certain, and where they were going to have to face very difficult circumstances, and it just didn't end well. So, that's again just I think there's a healthy tension to be held in. I mean, we're knocking on the door of a discussion about courage, but there's a healthy tension to be held. Anything in isolation can be a bit dangerous.
Yeah, totally. I know before we started recording today, we were having a little chat, and I wonder if we can go back to the story that you said back in Singapore. We were talking about the difference between courage and stupidity, weren't we? We should have rolled the camera then, but I was just thinking maybe we could revisit that a little bit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, part of my family history is that my mother, when she was a young girl, 6 years old, and with my uncle, they were living with my grandmother and granddad in 1942 in Singapore, where my grandfather was in the Navy. And in I think it was February 1942, or whenever it was in 1942, in the midst of the Second World War, when the Japanese forces then attacked Singapore, and they sort of attacked Singapore from the rear, if you like, from the land side, not from the port side, which was, anyway, it was unexpected. You can read about the history of that. But the reality for my mother and her immediate family then is literally she and my uncle were woken up. I think, you've got to get out of bed. We've got to get down to the port. And they got down to the port, and they managed to get on one of the ships. They were helped by some very, very good friends to get on a boat, and in fact they ended up managing to escape, and they were taken to Australia, where they spent the rest of the war years in Perth. And my grandfather, although they didn't know at the time, they didn't find out from that moment in 1942 until the end of the war in late 1945, or maybe even 1946, I can't quite remember, that my grandfather took his sort of river gunboat that he was captain of, which I think was HMS Scorpion, if you look it up.
What a name.
HMS Scorpion. And he took it out, and look, I may have got to naval experts, I may have got the description a bit wrong, but I mean, it's a fairly small coastal river gunboat. And out on the coast, was, a much bigger array of Japanese naval military sort of hardware to face, destroyers and cruisers and whatever. And my grandfather took his river gunboat with its very modest armaments, and he sailed out to engage the enemy forces.
Wow.
And I guess the inevitable happened in very short order. Sadly, it happens in war, it happens in conflict. His ship was hit and sunk, and he was killed along with many of the crew. So again, it just gets to that point that, courage is not without consequence, and that I think he obviously was. I mean, I'll never know, but obviously he could only judge the circumstances as he saw them with what he knew at the time, and he made that decision to go out against overwhelming odds and to, if you like, as he saw it, to discharge his duty. And obviously it had tragic consequences for him and a lot of other people. And that was his decision. I never look at these things as, was it a good or a bad decision, because you can only make the decision with the information you know at the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think, but obviously, there was a I guess a legacy from that the consequences of that my grandmother and my mother and uncle had to live with for the rest of their lives. That obviously they were without a father and a husband, and all the sort of difficulties of that ensued for the family. But so that's, many families have got those stories from moments of conflict, and that's just part of my family history. Wow.
And I think one of the things I'm kind of really drawn to is, making the decision based on what's in front of you. That's the key thing, isn't it? That's where courage really, is real or not, because it's really easy to say, if this happens, I'm going to do this, or to look back and go, this was a good decision, a bad decision, like you touched on there. Should have done it this way, should have done it that way. But actually, it's lived in the moment, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I mean, most of the time, most of the decisions we have to make, whether they're of very significant consequences, that one we've talked about in the context of the Second World War or whatever, generally speaking, we're never going to have all the information.
Sadly. I wish we did. Make life so much easier, wouldn't it?
Even for us data geeks, we're never going to have all the information or accurate information or enough time or enough resources or whatever it is. That's the nature of life and judgment and decisions, and that inform courage.
And the voices are always there. If I take the example of, a company has to deal with something important, maybe something that they need to own up to or something, let's say, and they might do all the right things and really nail it in terms of their response. But then the voice might come back, oh, they should have done that a lot quicker. Why did it take them a month or however long? So the voices are always there. Yeah. It's kind of trying to drown them out and say, look, what can we do with what's in front of us, again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming back to giving it your 200%, 110%, 150, shall we split? But what did you do with your life?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a really good friend of mine who's a builder,
right?
And I remember for years, quite on a regular basis, Peter used to ask me. He said, "Listen, Guy," he said, when I go to work, generally there isn't something, and when I've finished, there is, right? And you can see it." And he said, "I've asked you a number of times, what is it you do?" And I know you're very busy, but I still can't, I'm not quite sure what it is that you do. It's great.
I don't know if you ever watched the series Friends.
Oh yeah, well I've watched a few.
Chandler was known for no one could quite work out what he did. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, actually, I mean, look, when I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left university. But actually, I mean, call it serendipity, call it luck, call it whatever you want to call it. But I ended up applying for a job with a company. I said, look, I have no idea really how it was in business. Somebody said, look, it was a business. And I went to them and said, look, I can see you're recruiting. I have really no idea how your business works. I don't know. It's not my life experience. Apart from doing odd jobs and whatever. But I can tell you about me, what I know about me. And if you think there's a fit, that would be great.
Nice.
And by the way, I need a job. And fortunately, the people that I met, they kind of got that approach.
Okay.
Because they could have just said, well, what do you, I mean, I've done a bit of research. I know what you do and what you make. It happened to be in the food business. Mm-hmm. And actually, what happened was they said, well, I know you've applied for this particular job, which is advertised. But in the conversation, they said, actually, we'd like to offer you a job, but we don't think you should do that. We think you should do this. Mm. Anyway, it turned out to be a sales job. I didn't really know what, you know.
What did you study? What was the?
I did a history degree. I think what it gave me it helped. It teach me how to think. Mm. It taught me some skills about analysis, about data, about what story is the data telling you, and how to inquire and analyze stuff. And that's actually stayed with me all of my life. So actually, although, you know, history, it's not vocational. Mm-hmm. You can't, you know, my son's an engineer. I mean, he looks at me and goes, what kind of a degree is that, Dad? But it's not vocational, but it helped develop those skills. So actually essentially I ended up going into this sales job, which for me, I thought, I think, despite all the cliches about salespeople, I think this is ultimately problem solving. Mm. And, you know, there's a buyer and a seller, and if somebody's not buying, then there's a problem. It's a problem. There's got a solution somewhere. Yeah. Can I help with this other person find a solution? I mean, ultimately, what I ended up doing was I ended up going into. I've spent all my working life in business. Mm-hmm. It turned out that made me a kind of square peg in a square hole. Mm-hmm. It kind of worked.
It clicked. Nice.
And they taught me, the financial aspects of running a business and how that all works. And then I ended up with a team of people going out to look for new business opportunities outside the UK. It was all can you help us grow our business? Go and find countries, markets where we could grow a business of scale and put together the partnerships that we'll need in order to make that a success. And that's what I kind of spent about 36 or 37 years doing. And I had some great people around me who taught me so much and gave me opportunities. They gave me opportunity. I mean, looking back, I thought, you must have been mad. But not just me, but a load of us. They gave us, a relatively young age, a load of opportunities. And I found that I loved it. And so, that's the short version. It was about business, growing businesses, setting them up, but doing it actually all outside the UK.
And so were you with that company your whole career?
I had a huge list of 2 organisations I worked for over those years.
All right. Can I ask you what they are?
But it's not against the law to advertise, is it? So look, go and eat lots of McVitie's biscuits.
McVitie's? Okay.
And food business. And then I made the imaginative move, super creative, to move from biscuits to tea. For those of you, and if anybody's listening to this who's still working in the Twinings business, great business, and I worked in the tea business.
Amazing. Did you? Could I claim to everyone connected to this podcast that you were the one who decided to put biscuits with tea? Is that too much of a stretch?
I think I'd love to claim it, but I think I'm about 300 years too late for that.
Amazing.
But yeah.
So I imagine with that as well, you're moving around, you're making new relationships, connecting with people, like you're saying, in sales, and looking at how you can partner with different people to grow and stuff like that. That sounds like you need a few skills in your toolbox to be able to do that.
Well, it's great. Look, I loved it. It's not for everyone. I loved it. And actually, funnily enough, I don't know whether this is linked or not, but if it's off in a tangent, so be it. But actually, my mother, bless her, died many years ago. But she saw me start in these kind of roles, and she was always interesting. She was always really, she had a charming and beautiful, for me, completely exaggerated sense of what I was doing and, where I was going. But she loved it. She always loved to hear, which country you're working in, or which you're trying to set up a business in, and who you're working with and which country. And then I never, complete lack of emotional intelligence on my behalf. But one day I said, I'm really excited because I'm actually going to be going to a country I've never been to before, and I'm really interested to, because it's going to be such a complete culture shock, but I'm going to Japan.
Wow.
Given my family's history with Japan, I kind of, gross insensitivity, but it was interesting all those years later, she just couldn't engage in a conversation.
Wow.
It was still just too visceral. But interestingly, once I got to know, there were some really generous and helpful Japanese partners we work with, and I got to know them over the course of 10, 15 years. And we had some conversations. I was interested to talk to them about it once we had a good friendship. And actually, that also, I think, there's a whole thing about, letting things go. It's really hard. I mean, I know you can get into other things like forgiveness, but the ability to let things go, and one of the things that I did, I certainly experienced, I hope I learned, was coming across people from different cultures and different parts of the world. Of course, no surprise, I just realized, beyond the surface level things, just how differently people look at the world, just how differently people make sense of things, just how differently they go about making decisions. And I had to let go of a lot of stuff, because suddenly my own cultural baggage, if you like, my own cultural reference points, quite a lot of them I had to let go. But I think I would link that to our discussion about courage, because I think there's something about learning and having a breadth of perspective that's bigger than just your own, that I think is it feeds into that discussion. It's a critical. Without it, courage on its own can be destructive and dangerous. But I remember that moment when I had that conversation with my mother, and there are some things that are just so hard for people to let go, which I get, because they're visceral.
Absolutely, and carried for many years, and again, like at this point, you can only imagine what that felt like, what that looked like, flashbacks and bits and bobs that someone would carry and maybe become part of their identity. Is a tricky thing. I like what you said there in terms of getting different perspectives and then going, that's really refreshing. I never saw my life like that, or I never saw this issue like that. And it can be such a breath of fresh air to look at things sometimes more simply, and sometimes with a layer of complexity that you didn't think was there, And I think that's part and parcel of traveling. I know I'm going off on one, but that's just something that came to mind there. And then having the courage, like you said, to let go of stuff. That's courage can be associated with what can you do, what can you strap onto yourself, and what can you put on the cape and be brave about. But actually, it's what can you be vulnerable in, and really start to strip off stuff that doesn't really belong to you.
And I always remember somebody I got a huge amount of respect for that was really helpful to me. When I came to this in the business context, but I came to him, it could be for any of us, and I'd gone to him rather to say, look, I'd like to make this decision, but it's a bit bigger than my remit. Can we have a discussion, and are you okay to check you're okay that I do it? And I remember him looking at me and just saying, Guy, I'm not really interested in the decision.
Oh.
And I went, this is not what I expected. So I'm not sure if this conversation's going well or not. He said, what I'm interested in is who have you talked to? And that had a profound impact on me, because ultimately I hadn't talked to very many people, and I most certainly had talked to like-minded people. And he said, well, that on basis do you think that your decision is likely to be a good one then, or the best possible decision that could be made? So go find people that think differently to you.
Yes, absolutely.
That are experts in this, or will just bring a different perspective, and then see what it tells you, and then come back and tell me who you've talked to, and then make your decision.
My brain is firing off in lots of different directions with that. I think one of the things, we talk about echo chambers, we talk about the algorithms on social media, when you start to follow something or like something, and all of a sudden everything is about that. And we see, it's a little bit off topic, but just political parties and campaigns in America, not just in America, sorry to single you out, America, but the way that they feed these algorithms to get people to really only hear one voice can be really dangerous, very dangerous. I mean, we've seen history. I don't know if I was very good at history, but we've seen what that can look like, and how tyrannical things can get, and how people can go really far. Far, very extreme in their view, because they only had that view. They didn't see what the other side looked like. So I think there's a lot in that.
Well, I think, one of the... Look, it's a lot harder than it looks. It's easy to be comfortable with people that kind of think the same way you think. Yeah. It's not hard, but therein lies the problem. You get, people have called it groupthink. You just get people, as you say, in the sort of proverbial echo chamber, reinforcing what each other says. Whereas what you kind of need a maverick. You need, I've got blind spots.
I haven't. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We've all got blind spots. Well, actually, developing the self-awareness to know what your blind spots are, and then to gather people around you who can help you see what you can't see yourself. It's just so important. And I think if I come back to the sort of the use of the description of tension, I think that's so important for, this kind of foundational virtue to so many things, courage. But if it isn't held in tension with some of these other qualities, then it's one-dimensional.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if we get to a place, healthy spaces can take an idea and separate it from the person, and then attack the idea from different levels to see if it stands strong within itself. Whereas I think, when we're talking about echo chambers and things like that, what tends to happen is the idea becomes part of your identity, and then dare you attack the idea, you're attacking who I am, and that can be a really dangerous place in society. Can I say that?
Well, somebody once said to me that, to that point, be passionate about your convictions. Be passionate about them. They matter to you, Rix, don't they? They matter to me. So be passionate about them. But here's the tricky thing: but hold them lightly. Now that for me is another sort of implied contradiction. But how do you do that? Because if you're in the echo chamber, then you're going to be passionate about them, and that passion is going to drive everything. But actually, to hold them lightly gives you the possibility to lay some of them down, or to recognize when they need to change, or you need to adapt, or there's a broader perspective than your own that actually can give you something that it's your blind spot. You've given yourself something that you would have never got to on your own. And I think that's where the magic is, the kind of proverbial third way.
Yeah, that's where the magic is. I like that. That's good.
I've just thought of this. I remember when my father was ill, he died of leukemia. And I remember, we thought he just had bad flu and he couldn't get over it. And he was in the hospital. And he declined in health quite quickly and died quite shortly after the diagnosis. But I remember going to the hospital. I just called in to see him. And I remember the sister in the sister in the ward took me to one side. I was walking out. I visited. And she took me to one side and she said, "Can I just have a conversation with you?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And she sat me down. She just looked me straight in the eye. He said, "You do know your father's not going to make it, don't you? Has anybody had that conversation with you yet?" And none of the doctors had. None. I mean, that's not. People are busy, and I visit whenever I visited. But she looked me in the eye and said, "You do realise, don't you?" And that was a kind of like, no. And then I realised at the point she had the conversation that actually I wasn't facing this. That you assume all those things. It happens to other people. My dad's going to recover and it'll be all right. But she looked me in the eye, totally direct, was honest with me, and then gave me time.
Wow.
Didn't say a lot. So anyway, those sort of things, you remember those things. You think, but actually, she was doing it because she could see. I'm not sure that this young guy had somebody help him face what he's got to have to face. So anyway,
and it's a side of love and empathy that is important, to be able to have those conversations with people. There's a movie called Moneyball. I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt. And so Brad Pitt's trying to teach Jonah Hill how to fire people. And Jonah's going around the houses trying to, I'm really sorry. And he's like, no, be direct with people. Just tell them, I mean, I'm not relating it to the way you might have done it, but just if you can treat people with respect and be direct with them, then it takes away the whole layer of them mistrusting what's going on, trying to question all of these other things like, oh, hang on, are they pulling the wool over my eyes and all this kind of stuff. And I think that people appreciate authenticity, especially in those tough moments.
Yeah.
We've come into courage and pulled out and done all sorts of stuff. If you had to define courage, how would Guy define it?
My experience, my perspective is that actually more important than what we do, more important than what we achieve, more important than what we do for others, more important than the influence we may have over people or organizations, more important than all of that is the person that we're becoming. Okay, it's the person that we're becoming. And I think it's arguable that the sort of foundational virtue that can equip us for that kind of journey or that kind of process, whatever you want to call it, is courage. That investment in the person that we're becoming. And maybe just to unpack that one more level is that I think there are a couple of sort of characteristics, or there are a couple of qualities that can lead into that. And I'm going to articulate this because it's kind of the way my mind works, again, through holding a couple of things in tension. Because I think most of the people that have inspired me, that I've exhibited courage and have achieved things of significance across all kinds of walks of life, they've had what I would call a fierce resolve. At some point when circumstances are against you, your energy's gone, you're probably even lacking in self-belief, all the indicators are that whatever your task you're involved with, it's just not going to plan, it's not going to happen. When everything's against you, whatever, on the inside there's a fierce resolve that these men and women are able to draw on, and it's a sort of critical part of their character. But it's not the only thing. Because I'm going to say over here, there's also another sort of quality that's at play, which often I don't hear talked about so much, but alongside this fierce resolve is a humility. And it's this tension, or this ability to hold in play both fierce resolve and humility, that is this sort of gateway to courage, to being able to make those decisions that we've kind of reflected on. Because in humility, you find people who know that they don't know it all. They know that, as we've reflected already, that on their own they'll never get to the best possible decision, that they've got blind spots, and they're self-aware enough to know quite a lot about what their blind spots are, so they can gather people around them that will see what they can't see. That, to a point we touched on earlier, that the humility will give them the ability to let things go, things that they might hold very dear and believe in passionately, but they'll be humble enough. So I think when you see this fierce resolve being harnessed with humility, then it can lead to courage being a really positive, expressions of courage being really positive, potentially life-changing, but significant.
And I think not having the humility, if we look at not having the humility and going, well, I know it all, and I've got the courage, then now you're borderlining on, going down a route of arrogance, which can bring a lot of stupidity, which can, that's just one of many things that can happen when you don't have humility. Pride and things like that can really take a hold over you if you're not willing to let go of some of those thoughts.
Well, yeah. Actually, I don't know why this has come to mind, but one of an iconic piece of music that most people all know, whatever generation, and you hear used in various different occasions, is I did it my way. I did. No, actually, on one level, great piece of music. Blah blah blah. I know many people may disagree with this. I just think it's a shocking lyric, because kind of, if you think about it in the context of what we're talking about here, if you take away the humility, in a sense, if all you've got is I did it my way, kind of, that would be the problem. Unfortunately, Guy just did it his way. That's kind of the problem. And look, that doesn't mean we should celebrate who we are. Rix being Rix, Guy being Guy, whoever. But I also know that if I just did it my way without holding some of these things in tension, it wouldn't be great.
No, and very limited. Like let's say your way was great. Like it got to a point where it was really good, but it'd be limited.
Well,
it'd be really limited.
I'm sorry if that's your favourite song of all time or whatever, if you're listening to this. But
was there a movie or a book or something? I know we mentioned Chris, right? We mentioned Chris, but I'm thinking about entertainment or media or something that you came across in your life that really sparked something in you in terms of courage, in the context of courage.
Look, there is. And I don't know whether it's people would think it's a funny old. Of all the movies I've watched, and look, I've watched it. I've seen the theatre version of it. I've watched different versions of it. Blah blah blah.
Are you going to say Disney's Frozen? Is that what you're going to say?
High School Musical. Thank you, Katie. That's our daughter. I did watch that. I don't know how many times, but it's not made the cut, sadly.
Okay.
And actually, the film is 12 Angry Men, which you may never heard of. I don't know. 12 Angry Men. And
who's in that?
12 Angry Men. Yeah. You have to go back to 1957.
Oh, okay. All right.
Black and white. Guy called Henry Fonda. I think written by a guy called Reginald Rose. And look, honestly, I would say watch it. Now look, it's 1957. I think for a film made in 1957, it's kind of aged pretty well. Look, okay. I mean, if you're looking for diversity, if you're looking for a few things, but look, 12 Angry Men, and
I'm going to write that down for reference. 12 Angry Men.
12. You might say, what you want me to watch a 1957 black and white movie. Oh, by the way, and the whole movie takes place in one room.
Oh,
because the 12 Angry Men are a jury.
Ah, okay.
But actually, it's and in it the link with courage and what it taught me, and over a number of years, because I'm a bit of a geek on 12 Angry Men, is that you have this central character where 11 out of the 12 jury, it's a slam dunk. Mm-hmm. He's guilty. It's about a murder.
Okay,
he's guilty, and it's the story of what unfolds. And there's one juror who doesn't know that he's not guilty, but he's just got a question. and it starts with a question.
Right.
And it all kicks off because it's all so obvious, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, watch the movie.
Okay.
I won't say any more.
I'll watch it and I'll come back to you.
But I think what I saw being played out in the character is just how, you know, if you like, the courage, the decision to stand against the crowd. And to stand, not that you had a diametrically different point of view, but you just had a question.
Sure.
So firstly, to stand when nobody else is standing with you, that there may well be a moment. I remember thinking, of course, as we so often do when we see movies, and that's why they're inspiring, what would I have done? What would I have found within myself? Could I have done what that character did? And firstly, there's that. And then, I suppose there may come a moment, Guy. You may have one of those moments. You need to get ready for it because this is hard. So could I have done it? Am I ready? And the power of the right questions. He didn't have the answer, but he had a question. And then, of course, and guess what? It's no surprise because I've sort of touched on this. What gradually unfolds is that each of the jurors needs a perspective broader than the one that they can bring.
Can you think of one time in your life, an example from your life where you really had to put it on the line and you had to step up in courage and go for it?
Yeah, and I don't want to over-exaggerate this. You know, as I say, you know, I never developed into the superhero of my sort of 7-year-old imagination, but for me, this was telling. So again, another decision in the business I was working in. I remember I was responsible for a team working in a factory. It was in North Africa, and there was a great team there, and I worked with them for 2 or 3 years, and ultimately we all have bosses. That was my area of responsibility. And I remember I got because of various changes in the business environment and the sort of market, the people that we were serving, together with having taken advice and counsel from others, I remember taking a proposal to if you like, to my bosses, saying, look, I think it's my belief that, regret it, we've got to close this factory down. For the long-term health of the business, for the health of the organisation, we've got to make some investment decisions about where to place our investment, and for various reasons, it's not this site. And if you're involved in manufacturing or anything that involves people who are working really well together to do something that they believe is worthwhile, that's a kind of really difficult place to be. But I remember having this sort of conversation with myself and with others, saying, I think this is the right long-term decision for the organisation and for the business. And it's going to be terribly painful for quite a lot of people. But I think it's the right business decision, and we should do it. And then we should obviously set about implementing the plan in a way that, to the best degree we can, safeguards, the transition, or safeguards the well-being of the people that are going to be impacted, because there's going to be a load of people that are going to lose their jobs. But we help them prepare for a future beyond the factory, and that we sort of do the right thing in that sense. So I remember, and actually the decision was endorsed, and we set about, okay, how are we going to do this? But one of the things I and it links with some of the other things, 12 angry men standing, against the tide. I think, well, I'm not going to win a popularity contest for this. How are we going to do this? But I remember thinking, I've got to personally identify myself with this decision. I know these people, I've walked up and down the production lines, I know all the team, and I'm going to have to go and make sure that they know that this is not some 3 layers up the hierarchy. No, this is a decision that I've advocated and I'm behind. It's me, and you know me, right?
Brave.
You know me. And
you could have hid if you wanted to. You could probably hide behind those layers if you had to.
I mean, hey, look, it's tempting, and it's. But I kind of thought that I'm going to find out a lot about myself. Also, it's not completely sort of obvious black and white that it's going to be a tremendous success, this business decision. So I could really get it in the neck from the people whose lives I'm going to turn upside down. I could really get it from you said this was a good business decision, Guy, and what's going to happen 12, 18 months down the line. But there comes a point where you think, no, I genuinely believe this is the right thing to do. So I remember starting by talking to the general manager of the factory, saying, I'm going to have a conversation with you. I don't control what happens after this conversation. You do. But I explained the situation, and I said, I want you to help me implement this plan to shut down the factory. So nobody else knows here on the site except you. So that's the first big risk. But they ultimately said yes. Okay, I get it. I get what you're trying to do. Let's do this. And then gradually we brought in about another 4 or 5 other key people, same conversations. And then I always remember coming to the day of the announcement, and because you do all your scenario planning and all the rest of it, and we just didn't know how people were going to react, because we had a couple of examples where there were 3 generations working. There was granddad, son and son. Granddad, dad, and son working in the factories. Oh, this is a massive impact for certain households. And we called a meeting in the canteen. I remember, I'll never forget the day getting up on the table to make the announcement. And it wasn't a coincidence that the fire escape was behind me, and we'd informed the local police in case it all kicked off. But actually, the senior management knew there had been tears and upset, but they understood. And then I thought, but I've got to make this announcement. I've got to be standing. Anyway, I stood up and made it. And obviously, it was awful. I mean, you give people it was just like the nurse who gave me bad news about my father all those years ago. What do you expect? It was awful. And there were a couple of people that got really, emotional. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. Sure.
And there was a bit of poking, and there was a few words that I won't repeat here that got said. But as we then explained what we were going to do and how we were going to manage it, and we were going to take our time, that actually we were going to help prepare them to get jobs outside. Nothing was going to happen like tomorrow, the next day, the next week. That actually we had very high expectations of what they would do, which was, in a sense, was outrageous. What you're taking my job away, you're turning my family life upside down, and now you're telling me that you're going to expect a lot of me. But we decided to do that, and I'd learned from others, this fundamental principle that if you have high expectations of people and then you equip them and give them the freedom to go and do what they're good at, generally speaking, you see the best of people.
Wow.
And I said, look, you guys are good at running this plant. You know how to do this. I think when you finish shouting at me, which it's perfectly okay to do, you'll want to do this project well. And anyway, the end of the story kind of goes that they did.
Wow.
They did. I was shattered after that. I'll never forget it. But I mean, honestly, I know I hope this comes across the way it's intended to. But I mean, boy, the next 6 months reflected really well on those people. They absolutely did a great job. And when we kind of eventually closed the gates, I mean, literally closed the gates, put the padlock on because we'd sold the site to somebody, they actually were proud of what they'd done.
Wow.
So I think you can take whatever principles you like out of that. For me, it was just deeply personal. But I think that I saw that if you're straight with people, if you face the difficult stuff and you stand alongside people, you kind of walk with them and do the very best you can for them without in any way trying to pretend that it isn't at times horrible. You'll give yourself the chance to see people at their best. And as you can tell, I mean, that was a few years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And I think there is somebody once told a story about, the way you leave the town you're in is the way you arrive at the next town. The kind of principle being that actually, wherever you leave, it might be a place of work, it might be a place where you live, or whatever. If you're leaving something or some friendships, leaving well is powerful.
Yeah.
Because actually, if you think that when you arrive, if any of us think that, but when I get to the new place, well, it's going to be different. But when it's become normal, because everywhere becomes normal eventually, you suddenly find it actually you've carried the stuff.
You've carried
with you.
it. Yes.
So carry good stuff. Leave well.
And it links into what you're saying about letting go, the bravery in letting go as well, which is tricky. There's an approach to life that can be quite avoidant. And what you find is it'll catch up with you at some point, and probably when you least want it to as well. So I think leaving well is a great, it's a great side note to that. Thank you for sharing that. I was going to ask you if there's anyone that comes to mind that's really challenged you or inspired you. I know we talked about Chris earlier on, and I don't know if you want to add anyone else to that, or should we give that?
Well, not surprisingly, there's a long list. There's a long list of heroes.
Good. That's good.
I mean, maybe that's the thing. Just to finish on is, look, for me, and this is the way it works for me. I mean, I have a long list of heroes. Some of them living, some of them not. Some of them go back many, many, many years.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's easy. I mean, I find it easy to have heroes. But I think in these people, in these men and women that have achieved significant things and demonstrated attributes of courage and perseverance and achieved much, their wisdom is hard won.
Yeah, sure.
It's hard. I mean, there's priceless wisdom to be handed down from generation to generation. So that's why I love kind of reading and watching and listening to these people, because there's always stuff to learn.
Always.
So I don't. Get heroes. Get loads of them.
Get heroes.
For another podcast.
I don't know
if you want 10 of them,
shall I say this here? I'm going to say this here because I think encouragement is in my nature. But I think you're a bit of a hero to me a couple of times in my life. And one of the things I really remember, well, I quite liked, because I've heard you speak publicly a few times, and I think you led a leadership thing that was a part of a midweek thing that we did, and I just thought you had a lot of wisdom to share, which ties in with what you're saying. Listen to wisdom. It's good. It's hard earned, right? But I had to. My first time I had to do a bit of public speaking. I had the nerves and I had all the thoughts and the back doors over there, so I can get out of this. And then afterwards, I got some feedback from people, and you were one of the people who came up to me and fed back to me. I can't exactly remember what you said, but what you did say was very specific, and it was very significant. And for me, I was like, wow, Guy said that, because it was more about who said it than what was said. I don't know if that's a compliment. I'm trying to be complimentary.
I'll take it.
But it just meant a lot to me, and I was like, okay, because I think, Yeah, I just wanted to share that, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, heroes are important, and and I really like what you said, that have loads of heroes. You know, there's plenty, because we're all fallible, right? We all make mistakes, and I think it's probably a wider topic, but you know, you could put people on pedestals, and then when they fall, your whole life falls apart.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can gain wisdom from multiple places, it's only a good thing, right?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, cool. So thanks for that moment when you came over to me. It meant a lot.
Great stuff.
Last couple of questions. If you were in my shoes, what question would you ask yourself, if at all?
Well, I'm maybe not surprised. You know, where do you get your help from?
Where do you get your help from? Where do you get your help from, Guy?
Where do you get your help from? Well, look, you know, I would describe myself as a man of faith. I think, you know, there's, you know, I think sadly, but maybe inevitably, there's a lot of stuff that comes under the banner of religion. It's got absolutely nothing to do with God. And it's pretty unhelpful. But I think when you meet people that have had a genuine personal kind of spiritual experience, there's just great learning and wisdom and friendship to be had from them. So I think, you know, partly, of course, it comes from my faith. It comes from my faith in Jesus and in genuinely, you know, having that sort of meaningful spiritual encounters and learning from those that have. That's part of it. And then it's also, as we've touched on in the conversation, look, there are just so many other people that have expertise or knowledge or experience in different areas of life that I've had just the privilege to either get to know or have been put my way. So I'm just always looking for people, whether it's through the written word, whether it's through actual friendship, the spoken word. Yeah. Learn and look forward, you know, and therefore it's other people that have, out of their goodness, have inputted to me.
Amazing. Thank you for that. If you could sum up everything that we talked about today, which is such a big question, but if someone tuned in, forwarded right to the end, and was like, what are they talking about?
Yeah. Fierce resolve, humility. Explore how you hold those in tension. And personally, at my sort of season of life, although I'm prone to move to action, I'm actually trying to do less, reflect more, and take a few more risks. Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Go Encourage podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you. There'll be other topics down the line. And I'd love to get you back on board, back on the show and talk through some of that. One of them is relationships.
Yeah.
So that'd be good to get some insight into that. And then we're going to touch on parenting, but I know you're a granddad as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be really cool to have that perspective on parenting and then being a grandparent as well. If you'd come back.
Yeah, it was great. It's early days on that. 6 months at it, but but James and Jesse are still letting me. They're still letting me in. So yeah, no, it'd be great.
So I might not get you because you'd be busy like doing childcare and stuff. You know,
it's coming.
Yeah,
great stuff.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here. If people want to connect with you online, is there a place they can find
actually,
you?
You know, that's the thing. If people want to connect with me online, the best way is me.
Okay, all right.
Get in touch with Rix.
Okay.
If you think I can help with a conversation or something, then
that's great.
Pass them my
cool.
way.
Maybe they can chuck some stuff in the comments, and then
absolutely.
I'll come back. I'll come back and bug you a little bit. Cool. Well, thanks again for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure. I look forward to the next time.
Great stuff.
Cool.
Thank you very much indeed.
So if you've been watching from home, listening online, I hope you've got something out of that. And if you have, do send something to us in the comments. We love to hear how this impacts you, how it's interesting and all the rest of it. But whatever you're doing, and link to what was said earlier on as well, go forward, go give it your 200%, go for it. And then, hold back on some of the action when it needs to be held back as well. All right. I'll see you on the next one. Go Encourage. Really hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you did, do let us know in the comments, or you can connect with us via our social media channels, where the links are available on www.goencourage.com. If you haven't already, you can now get a copy of the Courage Journal that we've put together to help you build courage on a day-to-day basis. We have a paperback version and a hardback version as well. Links are on the website. You can purchase these in the UK, the US, Australia, Canada, and all across Europe. So go and have a look at that. I think it's going to be a really valuable resource. All right, so until the next time, whatever you're doing, keep moving forward and go encourage.